Batista was president of Cuba for 4 years, and during these years, his hunger for power grew greater and greater. After the first term of presidency, one must step down, as Cuba runs off of a one-term system. Batista knew this, and he showed no sign of concern. In March of 1952, he staged a coup on the Cuban government and repositioned himself back into the seat of presidency. A dictatorship, as many called it, was formed.
There I was, a liberal young man aiming to begin a career in politics. This is when I first met General Batista. I watched Batista in his second term of presidency as he labeled his entire government something of a disciplined democracy. Sadly, that was all but a euphemism, as Batista's government became nothing but a dictatorship.
No. You are but an idiot with a radical opinion. Almost as delusional as the fools in the Soviet Union. You see, under my power, Cuba prospered more than ever before. I myself launched it into an age of wealth. Sure, people might not agree with my methods of power, but I was only protecting the Cuban government from people like you.
I did my best to oppose your obviously corrupt regime. I filed lawsuits against you and your government, and attempted to bring you down politically. However, I realized that trying to peacefully unseat a ruler who had already controlled the entire nation was nearly impossible.
You ignorant fool! Your grasp of morality and government appalls me. Someday you'll learn that the government cannot be perfectly innocent if it truly wishes to fulfill the needs of its citizens.
Batista was going to bring Cuba down to its knees. He had already opted to ally with the United States and curry favor with Cuba's rich businessmen, instead of gathering support of the general public. Although I thought Batista couldn't possibly make any worse decisions, he even severed ties with a potentially close ally in Russia. Life grew harder for the workers of Cuba, and Batista crushed trade unions with any socialist political foes.
You think so selfishly. The general public didn't know what they needed. I did. I saw a chance to better the country, not pamper the citizens.
I could watch Cuba crumble no longer. I ceased my efforts to remove Batista peacefully and set upon establishing my revolutionary group. We were called the Movement, and by working as a sleeper cell and publishing our anti-Batista newspaper, we managed to gain many supporters and followers. By now, I had realized that violence was the only way to bring about positive change in Cuba. We collected weapons and began preparations for the budding revolution.
What an idiotic assumption. People like you are why violence still exists in this world.
After I'd planned for over a year, I began to make my preparations for an attack on the Moncada barracks, a government-held army. My revolutionaries were split among 16 cars, 3 of which never even reached the barracks. As soon as we began the attack, the government soldiers quickly stopped us with machine gun fire, as my men began to fall. I had no choice but to call off the offensive. We suffered untold casualties, most of them being a result of merciless, unwarranted government executions. In fact, I only recall discovering 9 dead soldiers missing after the battle, as opposed to a 56 who were brutally executed.
I had intended to peacefully deter you from trying to overthrow my perfectly functional government, but of course you had to go and try and kill my soldiers. Well, you essentially forced me into annihilating you and your puny army.
What hurt me most, though, was not my evident failure, but the response of the government. It served as a reminder to me that I must continue my work in attempting to overthrow Batista. As a reaction to the attack, the government entered a totalitarian state. The media was, from that moment on, completely government-controlled and therefore corrupt. Any protesting or dissent was ruthlessly crushed. To my utter despair, the government told the people lies about the attack, dashing our chances of public support. I had hoped that the citizens would be inspired by our bravery and would join our cause, but sadly, the government told the public that we attacked a hospital and had massacred the patients.
These rumors served only to deter brazen revolutionaries like you. In the end, I was only trying to protect Cuba. My actions would have further helped our country if you pesky rebels had not intervened.
These lies only served to embolden us. In fact, the people were so aware of what your government truly was that they demanded that you free us. And after we were let out of your prison, my comrades and I hid ourselves in Mexico, plotting your demise.
What lies? Your men took refuge in a hospital, forcing my loyal troops to attack you. Again, everything I did during the revolution was a result of your meddling in Cuba's affairs. Without your intrusions, Cuba would have stayed at peace.
Don't listen to this excuse for a ruler. During the time we were in Mexico, we gathered many important allies, including one of my right-hand men, Che Guevara. After receiving training and plotting how exactly we would execute a successful overthrow of the government, we returned to Cuba in 1956. Our return was nearly a disaster, as the majority of our group of revolutionaries were killed on the way to the mountains. However, we didn't lose heart and began to rebuild the movement once again.
Mercifully, I allowed some of you to survive and reach the mountains, instead of massacring all of you. I tried to preserve the peace by allowing you to realize you couldn't possibly fight against my forces.
If that is true, then it was a huge mistake. As we hid in the Sierra Maestra, gaining followers and arms, we came to know the landscape extraordinarily well. We then used our knowledge of the terrain to our tactical advantage. We engaged Batista's forces using guerrilla warfare, and although they far outnumbered us, we began to slowly defeat the massive Cuban army. Over the next 2 years, we weakened Batista's army, while simultaneously gathering the favor of the locals, who joined our ranks in the mountains. Finally, Batista became so enraged, he sent a large majority of his army into the mountains to wipe us out in what he called Operation Verano, and what we knew as La Ofensiva. Fortunately for us, we knew the terrain well, and used this to our advantage. Our guerrilla warfare tactics confused Batista's army, and gave us a massive edge. Although we had a close call at the Battle of Mercedes, we slowly managed to push back Batista's forces, and by the time we had won the Battle of Santa Clara, we essentially had full control of the government.
My operation would have succeeded if not for your deceptions. I was being merciful, allowing a ceasefire to negotiate with you, and instead of negotiating for peace, you used the time to escape and come back and go to war all over again. And you are accusing me of lying.
Like you say, the ends justify the means. After we overthrew Batista's dictatorship, Cuba became a far better nation. Social reforms took place, and laws for equality were laid out. Following years of revolution, Cuba was set to become a powerful nation. The Cuban Revolution, although bloody, was ultimately successful in eliminating many of the problems with the Batista regime. Better infrastructure began to appear, and quality of life improved. At last, Cuba was at peace.